Hello, YouTube. So this is going to be my review of Within the Ring of Fire, 77 Thrones, the Theological Codex. So this is a review I've been really eager to do. Well, you'll just have to wait and see how I feel about this book. But let's start with it's the best thing that this book has going for it. So, as you know, this is a supplement for Underwood's Within the Ring of Fire rules setting, based in the fantasy world of Kvegathale. Good things I have to say about this. We'll start with the biggest thing. This book is a mythology. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when I say that, I mean it's a real mythology, in the same way that J.R.R. Tolkien's, the languages he created in his books, in The Lord of the Rings, where he creates Elven, that's a real language. He really created that. And Ander did exactly the same thing in here, but with a mythology. Now, one of the books that I used to read when I was a little kid, back when I first started D&D, was a book called Legends and Lore, and it was an AD&D 2nd edition book, and I loved that book. That book was at the public library, and I would eagerly go down there to see it, to check it out every time I could. And that book was awesome because it basically talked about how to incorporate real world mythologies into your D&D game. Now, from reading this book, it is really obvious to me that Ander made this as well, first of all, he has said that he has a degree in religious studies, and from reading this book, it's definitely obvious. He put all of his studies to work when he created this book. He did such an amazing job. It's the amount of work that must have went into this book is truly astounding. But so what is in here? When it says 77 thrones, that means that this is a world in Kvegathale. There are 77 different positions, different thrones that a spirit can basically reside on, and claim a day. So there are 77 days in Kvegathale, in an entire cycle, and a divinity who rules over a throne rules over one day in Kvegathale. And they have domains that they also have power over, like cold or fire or love or that sort of thing. But he lays out 77 different divinities that rule over all of the days in Kvegathale, which is incredible. I mean, 77? And you might be wondering, are these really, is there really a lot of detail for these? I mean, 77, that's hard to put into one book. Well, yes, he fits it all in here. And most of them, the vast majority of them, have lots of information in here about them. And more importantly, what this book is a guidebook on how to play a follower of a divinity. And the vast majority of people in Kvegathale follow a divinity. In this world and in most fantasy worlds, the divinities, the gods, they are real. We know they are real. We can see their power. They interact in this world. They come and they interact with mortals on the planet, on Kvegathale. So we know they are real, and it gives you a guide on how to play a divinity, how to play a follower of each divinity. It gives you three different types of follower that you can play, or three different types of a cleric, someone who focuses in on being a worshiper of that divinity, kind of like a cleric in D&D. So, yeah, so let's open this up and get started. So we have three different types of follower, basically three different types of cleric. There are the druid, which is, it harkens back to the old style of the old druid from our world almost. More of an oracle and someone who is a sort of an oracle, a seer, a diviner, one who foresees the future and that sort of thing. And they tend to focus on one specific aspect of their divinity. Then we also have the priest, and the priest is very much the sort of thing you would expect to see in like a D&D cleric. They're more of the academic scholar of a divinity. They are the one who spends time sifting through old tomes on their divinity and studying with books and quill and pen. Actively studying the language of their divinity and their works and their history. That's a priest. And then we have the shaman, which, as you imagine, is someone who's really in touch with the natural world, finds the natural aspects of a certain divinity and focuses on those. Is able to take a spirit as its guide, goes on spirit quests, and that sort of thing. So those are the different types, and they are all laid out incredibly well. He does such a good job with it. But that's not what you're really here for. You're here to say, okay, there's 77 divinities. How does he do them? Well, he lays them out like this. He gives them basically their power, which is their spiritual level, what domains they rule over, who their parents were, what day they reside over, they have power over, the weapon they prefer, a gift they give to the world, their symbol, their servitors, sacrifices they demand. Because in this book, that's one of the cool things about this, is if you are going to play a follower, if you want to have a piety rating, and you should if you're playing in this world, if you have a piety rating, you got to follow what your divinity has laid out for his followers. Things that he accepts, things he doesn't accept. Basically the thou shouts and the thou shalt nots of divinities. So you better take a look, or else you'll lose piety. So you have so by doing that, you should be making sacrifices. You should be praying at certain times of the day. There are omens that the divinity can followers. The typical followers of the divinity, ceremonial dress, it goes on and on and on. The dogma, the avatar, or who's the one who is the divinity's representative on Kvegathale. So just tons of stuff. It goes on and on each divinity, on 77 of them. Well, not quite, but I'll get to that in a second. So let's go into something I dislike. It's honestly, with this book, I love this book. There's very, very little I can say bad about it. However, one thing I would say, if we go to the back of the book, all the way to the back, there's something that seems a little bit out of place to me in this book, and that is maledictions. Now, what's a malediction? A malediction is something certain divinities have clerical followers, like I described, the shamans, the druids, and the priests. But other spiritual beings, like trolls, for example, their clerics or they do not follow that sort of rule. They are what we would consider, a lot of people consider, magic users, or people who wield magic, and which is totally different than it's different than what the followers of the gods use. But that's where you get in things like necromancers and conjurers and that sort of thing. So a malediction is something that is given actually to someone who chooses to be a warlock. And a warlock is someone who goes against, basically, I believe, a code that most of these magic users follow. And the reason I'm not sure about this is because all this stuff, the maledictions, the warlocks, the magic users, that's going to be in a whole different book. That's going to be in the Book of True Names. So I'm a little, I don't exactly understand why maledictions are in this book, or really anything about warlocks are in this book, because that's going to be laid out in an entirely different book. Now, I understand why he didn't include all that stuff in this book, because that's not what this book is about. This book focuses on the divinities and their followers. The Book of True Names is going to be, it's going to be huge. There's going to be lots of stuff in it, and it doesn't belong in here. So I'm not really sure why it has maledictions in here. Also, the advantages section is very, very, very short. And half of the stuff is for warlocks. So again, not precisely sure why it's in here. But I'm sure our man can explain it to us himself. But again, it's such a minor thing; it's barely even worth mentioning. Now, on to some other great things about this book. So, each follower. So there's the artwork in here is spectacular. It's great. There's an image. Basically showing a symbol of what each god is. You also have, again, there are 77 divinities described in here. Now, there's not quite 77 because some of them are dead, but and I guess that's another small disadvantage, is that some of the divinities are not really covered in here because they're dead, but they do have a short section about who they were before they died, basically what the divinity was before they died, and some of the things about their followers and their history back before they were killed. So there's 3 different types. He gives, just as I said, there's so much detail in here. One of the greatest things in here is a section on each divinity called divine relationships. Now, what's that? A divine relationships basically goes into the soap opera drama that is the politics of these crafty divinities against each other and with each other. He talks about, you know, who's having sex with who's having an affair with who's allied with who's enemies, who holds a grudge against who is what sort of relationship do they have to their parents, to their brothers, to their sisters. That's all. There's so much description of that in here. It's like you're reading a Greek. If you've ever read the Iliad and the Odyssey, you kind of get that feeling in here. This feeling of, well, there's all these divinities, who are on one side or another, and even those divinities who are allied with each other have like some squabbles with each other. It's just incredible. There's a story in here. As you are reading through each divinity, a story sort of pieces itself together. So, for example, one of the arcs, one of the many story arcs that are in here, are the relationship between El-Sam and Laku, who are twins to each other. And there's so much just between those two. There's so much story contained in here that you can very easily use as a flame tender. It's incredible. I don't want to give too much away because you definitely need to read it, and you definitely need to buy this book. This book is a must-buy. It is definitely, this is the best role-playing supplement that has ever been made, in my opinion. It goes so far beyond anything that D&D made with deities and demigods. No, this gives so much more description than that. This is a book that just adds on to Again, when Anders set out, he wanted to create the most immersive role-playing game. And he has once again strengthened that in this book. Because now, as a follower, worshiper, or cleric of a divinity, you now know. You know how your character should and should not be acting in certain ways. That if he starts to do this, he's going to lose favor with his divinity. And that's so important, because I know that when I was playing in D&D or in other fantasy games, when you were a cleric of a divinity, not much was really expected of you, and they were really wishy-washy and not very well described. But that is so different in here. It's such an excellent book. You need to pick it up. I definitely, if I could give this game a rating, I would give it, it's almost a perfect 10 for me. This is all. Suspect that some of the books that are coming up may top this book. That might happen, but this book is so incredibly good. I read this book every day for inspiration for characters. If I want to be a flame tender one day, there's so many good ideas to come out of this book, because divinities play such an active role in this world. This is such an important piece to add to your role-playing collection. But other than that, that's really all I have to say about the game, about the book. It's very, very good. Need to pick it up. I'll be giving information below about. I'll be linking to the how to pick up this book if you so desire. And I hope you all have a great day. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.